if we can see that in the first round of the CIF playoffs. And EPJ, you've been spending a lot of time crunching numbers and all these math equations and all this stuff to try to figure out what the CIF will unveil to all of us this weekend with the playoff matchups. And I think we have some of those brackets. So, EPJ, why don't you take it away? And how did you come to some of these matchups?
Well, I mean, you'd have to look right now. I'm going with the latest CIF poll and kind of thinking that with all those all the seeded teams, which would be Centennial, Vista Murrieta, Upland, and Rev, all winning, I think that's going to hold form. So I think Centennial, as the defending champion, finishing 9-1, their only loss to St. Bonaventure, I think they definitely will grab the number 1 seed, despite Redlands East Valley and Upland both being undefeated.
So last night when we looked at it, I think you had Rev and was it Damien playing? And
yeah,
I
had Rev and Damien, and I was kind of looking around, and I was just like, I think right now that Norco going as a number 4, they're going to have to go to a seeded team, especially coming off this performance. I mean, this really hurts them in terms of the brackets. They could I think they will either see Rev here. If Vista Murrieta slips because of the forfeits and goes to the 4, I think Norco's there. The best I think Norco could do is maybe get Charter Oak.
And that was one half of the bracket. Here's EPJ's second half of the bracket. Obviously, some heavy hitters there. Vista Murrieta. North. That North Ukaipa game could be interesting if that happens.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
I think North is rolling right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been motivated ever since that loss to Centennial. There's even talk that how much they would love to see Centennial again. They think that play their best game that they can compete with Centennial, and I would almost agree with that. I think they can score toe to toe with Centennial. That would be a game that some defensive stops would have to be made. You look at that first game as Centennial kind of just shell shocked North in those first 4 minutes, got up 21-3 like that, and the rest of the game was pretty much evenly played. So, looking at that, I think Norco could possibly go to Upland, but I think they're going to try to avoid as many rematches from the regular season. I think there's no way around the Vista Murrieta Los Osos one, so I think that's going to be a rematch. But yeah, I think Norco Rev could be an interesting matchup.
Who do you think they would rather have? Upland or Rev? I mean, Upland.
I don't think they want to face Upland because they've
Yeah.
already seen what can happen there.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to the Norco coaching staff, and a lot of people on there will say that Upland's the best team that they had played this year, so even above Centennial. And I would agree. The Upland game against Norco was the most impressive I've seen any football team look this year.
You don't think that the
just so
committee
you
would
guys
try
know,
and-
the chat room saying right now, Upland Centennial would be the game I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the game. I think right now there is one team in this division that can dethrone Centennial, and it is Upland right now because they can combine the physical play on the lines with a defense that can, make some stops with skill players on offense.
Would they attempt to, on the other hand, on that Vista Los Osos situation, would they attempt to avoid having a repeat game?
They can try to do that. I mean, they'd love to avoid repeats, but last year, Vista Murrieta played Santiago, and that was a rematch of a regular season game. So, I mean, there's just certain things. Could you put Los Osos? You can't put Los Osos against Upland because they're from the same league. There's certain CIF bracketing rules, and the main rules are league champs and the number 2 teams have to be in opposite halves of the brackets, and teams from the same league cannot meet until the semifinals. So they have to work around those things. If you were to slot it just 1 through 16, might be a lot easier, but you have to do little things here. My original bracket, when I kind of scribbled it out, I had Norco versus Upland, but that would be two rematches in there, and I found a way. Yeah, you can slide Damien away, and I just basically took 3 teams and just swapped them around. It's like, this is a bracket that makes sense. Norco, I think going in could have maybe thought Charter Oak, given the best this fourth place team, Norco, that's got a good history, facing maybe what would be considered the weakest of the league champs. But tonight's loss is really going to hurt Norco. And I think as the fourth place team, they're going to get one of the 4 seeded teams.
And on the flip side, if North, let's assume they play Ukaipa and get past Ukaipa, how far can they get this? Are we talking maybe semifinals?
I mean, if they play at their best, I mean, you got to think they've already taken down Alamany. They, have basically dominated Norco. I think they dominated a Santiago team. So that second round matchup, potential north of Vista Murrieta, would be a great matchup. So, and then you look at just the quarterfinals in this matchup. You could see a Chaparral Centennial rematch. You could see Rancho Cucamonga versus Rev. You could see Charter Oak versus Upland. And then, Vista Marietta North, we'd be getting some great football there. And if the seeds hold up, just to see those matchups, Centennial versus Rev, that offense, the area's best offense versus the area's best defense.
Yeah.
And Upland and Vista Marietta, another one, a really great offensive team versus a really great defensive team. That would be probably the dream semifinal everyone wants. And I agree out there, Centennial Upland would be the matchup I think everyone wants to see. Those two teams played last year in the quarterfinals, and it was a close game until the fourth quarter when Centennial kind of dominated there. Upland is a much better team this year, and I think could give Centennial a run for their money.
So that Inland Division is absolutely brutal. Some great matchups looming in the playoffs as we move along. Now let's take a look at the Central Division, and EPJ went back in the lab and did more number crunching. He came out with these possible matchups when the CIF unveils them on Sunday. So EPJ, obviously, the Rancho Verde, I guess they're lined up. They're on a collision course with maybe Palm Springs. I don't know, for the championship game.
The 1 and 2 in here were really easy to figure out. Rancho Verde, Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Those are the 1 and 2 seeds for sure. Cajon beating Carter yesterday kind of really threw things into a little bit of a mix. So now you have Cajon, Colony, and La Sierra all at 9 and 1. I don't think they can punish Colony. Colony and La Sierra were 4 and 5 in the rankings last week. Carter was 3. Both Colony and La Sierra won. I don't think you can really punish them. So with certain bracketing rules, you can make how I have it. If you see the bottom half of the bracket there, I have La Sierra as the number 3 seed, Colony as the 4. You can put Cajon in that 5 spot. So some interesting matchups.
There's the Rancho could be a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, I mean there's some really good matchups here. Cajon Arlington would be a rematch of a playoff game last year. I think. You'll see. I don't think we're going to see a lot of great first-round matchups in this division, but I think once we get to the get to the quarterfinals, you're going to see, because I think this is a very top-heavy division where you have 8 really good teams, and you're going to have 8 teams that are just going to try to stay competitive.
Well, on the chat room, TCHS55 is making a bold prediction, and he's usually one of our more thoughtful commenters, saying that you heard it here first. Sanji will upset Rancho Verde in the second round.
I mean, that be
an upset.
Sanji, yeah, and Sanji is a team that we know is and kind of like Moreno Valley is one of those teams that play tough non-league schedules to prepare for the playoffs mainly, and
they're 29-1.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You look, those two teams, the records of their opponents are unbelievable. So, and I think that's going to make them battle tested. Is it enough to beat Rancho Verde? I think they'd have to catch Rancho Verde on a very off night. I think Rancho Verde kind of here, you're looking at them probably getting, I would see them getting to the finals again here. And in that bottom half, I think if La Sierra plays a great game, we could see a more competitive game. But in this division, I think there's only one team that can dethrone Rancho Verde.
And that's Palm Springs.
I know Mr. Erkley over here smiling.
The Indians.
Yeah,
So,
the Indians.
So Valley View.
Allow me to
Any
introduce
shots?
the people to the Indians, because I don't think anyone knows the Indians around here.
But I mean,
Let's move on.
But what would be interesting in the matchup I would love to see in that bottom half is Palm Springs La Sierra. They played last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Go ahead and let him say something about Palm Springs.
Thank you,
please.
Louis. Apology pending. Thank you.
But
Dane Tiedemann, quarterback.
Who is
for Palm
that?
Springs. He's the quarterback for Palm Springs. His mom was my middle school PE teacher. Just a little tidbit there.
Dane.
I remember that kid when he was in first grade. Little did I know he'd turn into... He's a good passer. Not only a good passer, but he's turned into an extremely legitimate threat on the ground as well. He can pass for 200 yards, and he can run for 100 yards with the best of them.
maybe reminiscent of a Scott Saunders.
Yeah, of Scott Saunders. I saw Steve Fabian, head coach of Palm Springs, at the fitness center that we both share together. We don't share and own a fitness center like Dave Zink, but we attend the same one. And he said that that was like in the second week, and he said that Dane Tiedemann had a little ways to go. He had the potential, but he hadn't quite seen the light yet. And from the scores that I've been seeing from Palm Springs in the last 5-6 weeks, I think Dane Tiedemann's seen the light. Not to mention he has one of the most probably dynamic offensive and defensive guys around, and Nick King, another gentleman. He played T-ball with my little brother. Just another random tidbit for that. But he was a good pitcher when he was like 7, so he's got to be an incredible running back now that
That
he's
just
like
makes sense, yeah.
17. The numbers don't.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. What you
Yes, Lewis, I know that's exactly why you allowed me to talk, so that you could put some retarded thing like that on there. Anyways,
But
moving on.
you know,
from there.
I do think you're right. Like, the matchup, like I said, I think that would be really intriguing if we get that semifinal is La Sierra Palm Springs. Last year they played Palm Springs, got out to this huge lead, and La Sierra made this unbelievable comeback to make it close. And I think this year the La Sierra much better improved under Coach Mark Rechtenwald. That would be a great matchup. But yeah, I definitely see Rancho Verde Palm Springs collision course.
The Palm Springs defense has, in the entire DVL, I read this in another unnamed paper. I won't name the paper. In 5 DVL games, the Palm Springs defense allowed a total of 16 points in 5 games. That's
But they don't play
for
anybody.
Lewis. I'm going to break it
that's
down
not-
for Lewis. It's 3.2 points per game. You
That
say they
none
don't
of
play
them
anybody,
none of them are the
but La Quinta and Palm
Marina Valley
Desert.
Rancho Verde.
But La Quinta and Palm Desert, the teams that they are beating
That's never going to work.
in the teams that they are beating in the DVL are just as good as as a lot of the teams that.
They're not Rancho Verde. Though.
No, I know.
No, I mean,
but they're just as, those teams that they're beating in the DVL are just as good as a lot of the Inland
Yes.
Valley League teams that Rancho is beating up on.
Yeah, and I agree. And like I said, it's one of those things. I think both of those teams we're going to see for a couple rounds cruise.
Yeah.
And once the semifinals come around, where we could see Rancho Verde versus, I guess my pick in this one would be Cajon or Colony. I think Rancho Verde Cajon, a likely semifinal, and La Sierra Palm Springs. That's where we're going to see those two teams really tested at some point. Because, like I said, Rancho Verde is the most interesting one because they really haven't been tested all season, except from Heritage. So, and it's been 7-8 weeks. What happens when they get in that first close game of the year? How do they respond?
If that game's at Ralph Watt Stadium, you never know what might happen. We saw what happened 2 years ago. That was a CIF
I think the last time
title.
I was at Ralph Watts Stadium, Citrus Hill kind of handled
Handled them. What year was that?
I think it was 07.
Oh,
So.
you didn't go to the CIF game?
Huh?
Who did? I don't even remember. Who
Yeah, I didn't
Palm
cover the
Springs
guy. I
beat in
didn't cover that
CIF.
one. Yeah, I can't. It was Serrano. I believe.
Oh, you weren't there.
We did not cover.
Oh.
Well, as much as I enjoyed this Palm Springs Indians talk, the Rancho Verde, according to EPJ, the no doubt #1 team in the Central Division. But now we're going to move on to the Eastern Division. And once again, EPJ has his bracketology, the possible matchups that we could see in
This
the
took
first round.
forever.
You know what? I'm glad someone did it because it's a lot easier when we just get this little packet from EPJ. It says playoff scenarios, and it has all these these games. It's a lot easier than us having to do the math. So, Eric, looking at this one, Summit won tonight, wrapped up their league championship, and
I will say this: great win for them, historic win for them. I disagree with the CIF. I believe Citrus Hill should be the #1. They are the only undefeated team in this division. They have rolled some pretty good teams, and they ran through their division. I think they should be the #1 here, but I think you can't punish Summit for beating a good Kaiser team, and they'll hold on to that 1 seed. So, if I were doing the CIF bracket, yeah, I would flip that around, but I think Summit will take the 1, Citrus Hill.
do you think, regardless, that the Summit Citrus Hill matchup is inevitable? You think it's going to end up
I
in the
think there are
championship?
some other teams that could surprise out there. Now, if we look at that top half of the bracket that was up there again, what made it interesting was the Elsinore loss. How I have it here is I still have Elsinore almost as like they didn't lose, because what happens is the only other team you can put in that spot where Elsinore is Silverado as the other league champion. They are the Desert Sky League champion, but they're a 5-5 team. It's hard to put them in that spot. They're another team that goes out and plays a ridiculously tough non-league schedule, tends to go 0-4 or 0-5, 1-4.
They roll through league play.
And they can get through their league.
Yeah.
So what you could actually see happen here, I would not be surprised, is to see the Silverado San Jacinto and the Elsinore West Valley games just flipped in the order. So Elsinore would maybe have to face Summit earlier or whatever. It's just how I look at this is they're supposed to give their #1 seed the easiest possible road. And I think if you look overall, most people would probably say Elsinore is still a tougher team than Silverado given the makeup. Elsinore has a better record than Silverado, so I think they slide into what would be considered that #5 seed. But in this division, no, I believe there are 4 legitimate contenders for the title here, and that is Citrus Hill, Summit, Heritage, and Serrano. I think Heritage, obviously plays really great physical style of football. They have the running back and everything. I think Citrus Hill is the most talented team in the division right now. I got a chance to see them yesterday, and even though Davian Payne only played 3 plays on the entire field, they showed their other weapons out there. And then Serrano, as anyone knows the history of what formerly was Division 8 and is now the Eastern Division, one of the best coach teams in this division. Coach Mahalchek every year does a great job out there. So if I was looking at this one, Summit's one of those teams. We'll see. They can be up and down in the playoffs. Can they beat Serrano? I don't know. That's going to be a good matchup. I mean, if I were to sit here and say, if this is the bracket that comes out, what would be my predicted final? I would say Citrus Hill versus Serrano.
I really like Citrus Hill. We were talking about this before you guys came back, but I saw them against West Valley, and I was like, yeah, obviously scored a lot of points, but most of that was because there were so many penalties, and they were deep inside of West Valley's territory the entire time. But man, against San Jacinto, they looked really good, and Hodge is incredible.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Everyone's going to be gunning to stop Davian Payne, and it's like, fine, we have a great quarterback who's got a good arm and 3 great receivers, and I think what's underrated was Citrus Hill is their defense. They gave up 28 points to West Valley, but a couple of those touchdowns came late. Their first team defense has not given up more than 15 points all year. So I think that's going to be really a really good matchup. I think Citrus Hill is the favorite in this division. Summit, we'll see. They have a lot of talent. I think the matchup that would probably be most intriguing to people would be Summit and Citrus Hill because of all the different skill players in offense. You see Dante Dion, Jamal Williams, Bernard Porter versus Trevor Hodge, Davian Payne, Kendall Moore, and KJ Young. That'd be interesting. But, the one I would like to see again, I saw when Citrus Hill beat Serrano in the semifinals in 2007, one of the best football games I've ever seen, where Serrano went down and scored a touchdown to take the lead with 4 minutes left, and Citrus Hill came right back down and scored at the end to kind of keep that streak going. So definitely a division that I think is really interesting. You'll see some good first-round matchups. Silverado versus San Jacinto, a great first-round matchup. Elsinore West Valley would be a great first-round matchup. So I think I think there's 4 clear teams that are going to contend for the title, but there are another 7 or 8 teams that are really going to battle and could pull off an upset here and there. And blow
so maybe the most wide open of the divisions.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there may be only 4 title contenders, but could you see San Jacinto beat Silverado League champion? Yes, you could possibly see that. So I think when you get to those teams that would be considered the 10, 12, 13 seeds, they have a shot to battle in this division. So I think you can only count out 2 or 3 teams from maybe not being able to win a first-round game.
So there you have it, some of the possible playoff matchups that we could see when the CIF unveils the playoff brackets on Sunday. And keep it here on HS Game Time Live. We have a lot more highlights and scores to get out to you for Dave Zink and Louis Amistoy, Chris Erickley.
Count on Louis to play a terrible song.
Well, we're going to be right back. The show is rolling tonight. Keep it here. You're watching your favorite show, HS Game Time Live.
And you can let your hair down. Hey.